Hey everybody, welcome to our next case study with imperialism in Africa. And today we're going to be looking at the French in Algeria, as you can tell there. So go ahead and get the warm-up done. I just have a couple questions about vocab words that may have never encountered before. Again, just a reminder about that vocab. Keep building that list, that good red word list, and we will be using that here in a couple lessons. Also, just a little bit of housekeeping while I'm at it. Please take today your Middle Africa map quiz. I'll probably set aside some time at the beginning of the block for us to do this in case you're not there. And then as well, use this time to go back and click on your North Africa map quiz and make corrections if you would like to. I highly recommend you do. It's free points. Literally all you do is you go back to class time. Okay, like where it says Unit 5, North Africa map quiz. You click on it, and then when you find one that you got wrong, you just click it, and then you scroll down just a little bit, and you'll see on each question, I'll say change my answer, and you can change your answer there, and that's how you do that, okay? So once you've done that, let's get to the French and Algeria. So first, we've got a short read here. Okay, why did the French colonize Algeria? And we're going to kind of use this as our introductory text for today. Now, one of the vocab words that I asked you about in your warm-up was the word assimilation. And this is where, compared to some other colonies that we've taken a look at in the past, like, India or China, the French are much more, I think we can use the word zealous in trying to assimilate Algeria. And assimilation is where you try to make somebody more like yourself, okay? So in the case of Algeria, as it says here, French leaders wanted to change Algeria's culture to make it more French by encouraging people to speak French, limiting the influence of Islam, educating Algerians about French history, literature, political ideas, etc., etc. And so if we look down here, it says, in the reading below, we'll explore the France's. Nice. That's a good typo. Let's go ahead and fix that. We'll explore France's attempts to actually make this happen. Okay. And we'll look at some, kind of foundational social cultural policies, and there's some really, really good videos that go along with this reading that I cannot emphasize enough that are excellent. And then it says, as you read, consider how colonial laws pushed Algerians to change their cultural practices. What effects do you think these changes had? So right here, this is where this is going to be a little bit different from what we've done in the past. You are going to be doing this reading on your own. And so now that we've had several lessons of, again, practicing, reading independently in class, I want to see what you can now what you are capable of on your own. With that, okay, you want to make sure that you turn in the copy of this reading with your yellow annotations done below this lesson on Schoology. So please make sure you do so, okay? Once you've done that, you can go on with me to the next part, okay? So if you can understand why the French colonized Algeria, that it has a racial component to it, it's political, it's got economics and tied in there. It's a little bit of everything, right? Especially when you're trying to make somebody part of yourself, it's gonna kind of include everything. This is then going to bring us to France trying to remain in control of Algeria after World War II, and that's what we're going to focus on here. So control conflict and coups in French Algeria. So right here, do the means justify the ends? So is it okay for you to do bad things in order for good outcomes to happen? Or is it okay, I don't know why you do good things for bad things to happen, but sure. And then what cost is too high for independence? You're going to see here that there's some pretty grisly stuff coming. So let's get to that. Okay, so a little bit of context first. How did Algeria respond to colonialism before World War II? There's a video right here. You'll need to watch this, but I will very quickly sum up the three here. Once you've done so, please list the three strats on your notes. But here's my takeaway from them. The first is assimilationist, which you have some Algerians who do try to assimilate to the introduction of French colonialism. The second, okay, is this kind of almost like spiritual I guess we could call it kind of a retreat into Islam and understandings of that in terms of how they respond to colonialism. And then the last one I want to actually kind of cheat here. I'm going to pull up the video just briefly so I can actually make sure I get this right, because I don't want to goof it. There we go. We have the last one here, which is going to be ultimately the route that is chosen, which is the independence route. Like, there does come a point in Algerian colonialism, for Algerians, that is, where they're simply just left with no other options. And so at the end of the day, they're like, well, we tried assimilating, we tried, you still treated us like second-class citizens, even though we never wanted to be, in many cases. And then there's others, again, you can see there, who tried more of a spiritual route, still didn't work, and finally, it's really the only option left. So let's go on then. All right, so after World War II, and we've talked about this in class, okay, there is a big push across Africa. It's Pan-African, basically, independence movements, right? And Algeria is no exception there. The difference is, I think, what really makes a huge difference is that the French have literally been in Algeria since the early 1800s. They've been there for a long time. And the Algerians have tried, like, again, you saw those different approaches there. And so after World War II, in many cases, there's not much left to talk about, right? If you want to kind of put it that way. They tried all the possible options. And so after World War II, a group called the FLN is formed. Okay, now these are Algerians who are in this. It's a nationalist, pro-independence terrorist group. If you're wondering, like, why is it the FLN? Where does that name come from? There you go. The Front de Libération Nationale. Okay, it's again, notice the influence of French there, right? Now, as I say here, likely they form as a result because all other options for independence are exhausted. So the FLN, in terms of their approach here, I've got lots of videos that are embedded in this slide presentation. Cannot highly recommend you check those out after I've kind of explained here. The FLN, though, is ruthless. First, they strike at the French military. They strike at their own civilians who are cooperating, and there is actually a name for these group of people. They're called harkies. Okay, that is still used as like a slur today. For basically Algerians calling out other Algerians who have sided with the French. The FLN considers these people traitors, and they kill them just as willingly as they kill the French. Even if you insulted a person from the FLN, it would often get your throat cut. The thing that I want to emphasize to you here too, okay, is that when the FLN rises up and they kill about 100 different people across all of Algeria in the first kind of waves of attacks, it's mostly in the countryside. It's kind of more of a rural thing. So the French military gets set in, and I almost like think of this, probably the better way to think of this is almost kind of like Vietnam. Like, and the reason I say that is because it's like the French are going out and trying to do search and destroy missions. They're trying to find FLN cells and in many cases, torture them into, giving up, information. There are across the board here. And as you saw from the videos earlier, the French are not necessarily nice here either. They openly torture people and admit it. Please, if you're wondering, you're like, oh, you want to see evidence of it? Watch the video, and you can actually see the general right here admit that yes, we knowingly tortured people, and I have no regrets about it, which is pretty crazy. And then, even the French even try forced resettlement of major parts of the Algerian population, just moving whole chunks of people, and they still can't crush the FLN. And the war is now has started. Okay, so go ahead, watch the video, please, and then continue on with me. Okay, so it's excellent. Check it out. Now, in 1956, so 2 years later, okay, the FLN changes tactics, and this is where things intensify quite dramatically. They shift from kind of focusing on like the broader scope of Algeria to just the capital city of Algiers. Now, why this matters is because, again, there are by this point, 1950s, 1.5 million Europeans living in Algiers and some of the other cities there, who are enjoying a much more privileged lifestyle compared to the rest of the rest of Algerians. So the idea behind the FLN here is that you're taking the terrorism to the actual French populace. They are going to really concentrate on that. So watch the video there, please. And they tell you actually what the FLN does, and I'll just summarize it for you briefly after you watch it. So go ahead, watch it, please. Okay, and then pause this video. And again, summarize what you learned here from it in 2 sentences on your notes. What they basically do is to mark their starting of this, the FLN, what they do is they set off, I think it's 3 bombs in, like, basically we call them, like, we don't really have anything like this today, but it's like student cafes and like places where young people would, young Europeans would hang out and like, listen to rock music, and coffee bars and those kind of things, which again we don't really have. And what they do then is they actually have Algerian women dressed as Europeans smuggle these bombs in and let them go, and it is months and months and months and months and years of urban domestic terrorism. The French, they again torture people. They start hunting down the cells of the FLN. The FLN tries strikes that every Algerian in Algiers stop selling stuff. And the French come in and they try to, the military, and they force all the shops to be open and cause a whole bunch of destruction. They even sector off segments of the city that you had to have passes, to go through, and everything gets inspected. It's pretty brutal. Now, eventually what happens is they root out the cells of the FLN, and the French declare victory, and Algiers does kind of return to normal. Let's talk about, in the meanwhile, what's happening in France. Okay? So anyways, watch this video. Good stuff. So talk with a partner. Who's the good guys of this story? I'll give you my opinion on it here after you pause, but think about it. Are there any good guys here? And I would argue no, there is nothing redeemable. Or nobody in the story who's maybe redeemable. These are all different actors thinking about what they're trying to do best at the time, and just it's a slaughterhouse. Again, 1 million Algerians are going up to 1 million Algerians are going to die in this war, not counting French casualties notwithstanding. Okay, so if you heard me hint there that something's going on in France, that's because there is. So France, again, is supposed to be like the nation of liberté, fraternité, fraternity, equality, and liberty, is doing this to Algeria. And so there's some very, very, they basically become like, the closest thing that I would tell you guys to think of it is like the Black Lives Matter protests that erupted in 2020. And these just very long-running protests in France itself about how to deal with Algeria. And you have some conservative, members of the French populace who are like, no, like Algeria is France. Remember, because that's France's argument, is that like Algeria is just an extension of France, even though we're not going to give them citizenship. And then you have others who are like, no, like this is wrong. We shouldn't be doing this. In the wake of all this chaos, there is a constitutional crisis. And what it is that a group of military generals in Algeria launches what is called a coup. Now, coup is slang for coup d'etat, which you're like, that's not hopeful either. It's a French word that means military takeover of the government. Okay? And this coup that is launched in Algeria, again, coups are not exactly like super democratic, right? They topple the current French government, and the man that they are looking to install is Mr. Charles de Gaulle. Okay, now de Gaulle, I would recommend you look up a picture of him. He's kind of an important dude. The reason why he is pointed to by these generals is that they hope, with him, being a well-known national figure. He was the guy who stood up to he led the French resistance during Nazi occupation of France. That he will hold on to Algeria for France. That he'll double down on it and try to assimilate it. And he disappoints them. And the word they would use would be betrayal. And lets Algeria go, and Algeria becomes independent in 1962. So after 8 long years, the whole FLN war is over. Or is it? Because it gets worse. We get the OAS. Okay? So, again, please keep watching these videos that are here, because they're amazing. This group, okay, so there are a group of somewhat French politicians, but then especially elements of the French military who are hardcore hardliners. Basically, we're going to assimilate Algeria at all costs mentality starts. Okay, and this is the OAS, which stands for the Organization of the Secret Army. And if you translate it into French, then you rearrange the letters to get it right. And they carry out terrorist bombing, or terrorist attacks, bombings, even assassination attempts on de Gaulle himself, for not trying to keep Algeria French. So they target their fellow Frenchmen. They target the elements of again, like the remainders of the FLN and Algerians who are again wanting to enjoy their independence that they're going to have, and think of this like a war within a war, and it's just chaos. Now, eventually the OAS will peter out. By the way, the OAS still openly meets with their members even today, and and just they kind of muse about the betrayal of de Gaulle for what they did to them. But the aftermath of this is really nasty, because when Algeria declares independence, and again, this is like, the FLN in some ways achieves victory at the end of the day, even though they kind of got stamped out. 1.5 million European settlers are going to flee back to France after a whole bunch of massacres. And again, you can look at that and be like, oh, why were the Algerian people massacring European settlers? That's terrible. Well, yeah, you also have to remember, for the Europeans who are getting massacred here, just remember like the whole history of what France has done to, Algeria for the last 150 years, right? The kind of the fallout from this is just extremely, extremely painful. Like, France doesn't even allow Harkis, who again are those the nickname for the slur for those Algerians who had supported the French during the whole thing, and they don't even allow them to immigrate to France, even though many of them they are hunted down and brutally killed, or go into hiding in Algeria. Now, there is a couple thousand that some French people help out, some of them, to get to France. But even today, now that, obviously 40 years has passed and there is a lot of immigration from North Africa into Europe, like if you're Algerian and living in mostly Paris or Marseille, which are the two main colony groups or colonial groups for, or kind of settlement sites for, migrants, you do not let anybody else know that your family, supported the French during this time. So there you go. Okay, so your next ticket right here. We'll see how you do with that, and that'll bring us to the end of our lesson. So other than that, I will see you guys next time, and we will jump into Kenya and the British.